Good afternoon and welcome to a slightly belated Hibs Observer debrief of the Edinburgh Derby victory over Hearts. I'm Liam Bryce, joined by Craig Nisbet to give you a comprehensive, we hope, insight into a long-awaited win at Tynecastle for Hibs. Craig, thanks for joining us. We've managed to track you down for this finally. How are you getting on?
Yeah, I'm in a much better state than I was. Yeah, I'm doing. But listen, it doesn't come round often, so we've got to celebrate it when we can. But
Exactly. You need to enjoy these. In fact, before we even get anything, like just it's just to get like what does that result mean as a fan, having probably watched so many of these Hibs go to Tynecastle so many times and being disappointed?
Yeah, it's hard to kind of put into words. Really, it's one of those ones that it just gives you such a massive lift, such a boost. Like the confidence, being able to celebrate it, being able to like talk positively about the team and the performance and the result. It's unbelievable. It's one of the best feelings, and it doesn't happen often enough. But it's when you go away from home and doing it at Tynecastle and stuff, there's just no better feeling.
Absolutely. So obviously we're a few days late with this video, folks, but we thought obviously the result and the occasion was too good not to do a tactical review, even if it is a few days after the fact. So we're going to get stuck into that right away. Just after, as always, a word for our sponsors. Good Vibes Giveaways are proud to sponsor the Hibs Observer and offer fantastic prizes to fans of the club. Prizes change weekly and include tech and gadgets, days out, weekends away, tax-free cash, and even Oasis tickets. So get your tickets now at www.goodvibesgiveaways.com. So obviously the kind of, I suppose, the nerves and the tension of an Edinburgh Derby will kick in a bit long before the referee is blown for kick-off. But I suppose it probably jumps up a wee notch when you see the teams come out. But I feel like it wasn't a surprise to see David Gray go with the same team again, considering how well it worked in the previous game at Aberdeen, wasn't it?
Yeah, no surprises. And I think like Aberdeen and Hearts, they both, there's a big reliance on pushing the fullbacks high up the pitch and getting them involved, similar to what Aberdeen try and do. And, the fact that we had that blueprint from an away game that we went, lost the first goal, but then we're able to still tactically stick into what we were doing, go a bit more direct and sort of counter against them. Yeah, it just made perfect sense. It was good that obviously Newell and O'Hora sort of pulled through, obviously having gone off with slight injuries. And I think Chris Cadden went off against Aberdeen as well, and he was able to sort of start the game as well. Because I think that's important and for that as well. And it just meant, obviously we'll probably get to it, but the subs had like quite a big impact in the game. So certainly that starting 11 put an absolute shift in to get us to where we were in the game to let us go on and win it.
Yeah, a few guys playing through the pain barrier there, I would imagine. So we'll just take a wee quick look at the stats, folks, because we've already covered this quite in depth on the website. And I'm sure a few of you have maybe already kind of been through all this. Just as we always do, we start with the kind of expected goals race chart that always just gives you a kind of idea of how the game panned out in terms of chances created. You can see there, Hearts maybe for the first few minutes started on the front foot. But then obviously when Hibs got that goal, barring one chance afterwards, it was all Hibs for the majority of the first half, which probably made it all the more frustrating for David Gray that his team went in level at the break. Then you can see second half there is where Hearts started to get a sort of foothold in the game. David Gray said he made some changes to combat some things that were happening in the middle of the park. Obviously, as Craig said, then we'll touch on the subs and how important they were. But it was kind of almost perfectly aligned with David Gray making those changes that Hibs re-established themselves in the game. And then obviously Dwight Gale goes on to score that winner. And then they saw it out quite comfortably from there. So, I mean, in terms of performances at Tynecastle, even just taking away the result, is it even if it had finished in a draw, would you have come away thinking, well, this is one of Hibs' better performances here in quite a while anyway?
Yeah, I certainly think like that first sort of 35 minutes was, we had a couple of really good chances, where Ellie Johan's shot, and we had a couple where ball got, Nicky Cann had the volley and Gordon spilled it and we were in there. So we created like just a flurry of chances that, we don't often see too much when we go away to Tynecastle. So, up until that point, I would say, towards the tail end of the half, we started to slow things down a little bit. And I totally agree that and having watched it back, like the first sort of 10-15 minutes of that second half, Hearts were just creeping into a little bit more. However, they weren't like cutting us open and creating massive chances. They were just retaining a lot of the ball and getting into more and more dangerous positions, and we were defending pretty resolutely. But obviously we held off to that point, and then that allowed us to make, two fairly attacking subs, and putting Quan on. Quan's a bit, he likes to push forward a lot more and maybe be a bit more on the front foot, not sit as deep as maybe Noel would. And obviously putting Dwight Gale on for Ellie Yuan was quite a big, like an eyebrow raiser, really. I didn't think that was going to be the sub that we were going to see. So, and then I also think that Hearts taking Spittle off was a massive thing as well, because he looked like one of the only players that was really going to cause us any damage. So I think when he went off as well, I just sort of felt like even just in those short couple of minutes, the pendulum kind of swung back to us a little bit, and then again, good time to get the goal, and then we were able just to sort of sit in and say, look, break us down. We still had Boyle on, we still had chances to counter as well. So it was like a perfect game plan again from David Gray.
Yeah, and all credit to him for that. Just before we get into the clips and the tactics board, just to kind of look at the average positions in the game. I've kind of included both teams in here for a change, just to give a sort of broader idea. You were saying there, Hearts very reliant on getting their full-backs high. And I think you said before the game that you expected a lot of what they were going to do to come down Hibs right, and you can certainly see that there. The kind of connections between guys on that left side, Spittle and Penrice, in particular, looking to link up. And so it was a test for Hibs on that side. But I think you kind of talked there about how, as the game went on, Hearts getting maybe more into dangerous areas without really causing consistent problems. It wasn't as though they were cutting Hibs wide open. A lot of it was going down that side, and Hibs seemed prepared for it, I felt.
Yeah. I mean, I think that obviously the big chance for them came at the end with Shankland, who just took too many touches, and Iredale ended up blocking. But Smith didn't really have much to do, and I think they were prepared for Hearts going down that side. They knew they were going to do that. Hearts actually quite a few times, as we'll touch on, like got into good areas, and I actually think I didn't actually have the chance to go back to look at when we spoke about the last derby, but the Hearts can kind of get past you and get through. It's just when they get into the final third, everything just seems to shut down, and they just don't have that like cutting edge that they have in the final part of the pitch. But on the whole, Hibs dealt with it really, really well. Obviously Hearts' goal comes down that side. That's probably the one time they really did expose us and have us sort of O'Hora dragged out and things like that. But even then, Shankland's header, Rocky should clear it. It's an own goal. So they did go down that side, but I do think we managed it fairly well. And I actually think that Miller coming on for O'Hora helped as well, because Miller because he's a fullback naturally, he's really comfortable going out and defending in the wide areas, whereas I think for O'Hora, he doesn't look as comfortable in there at the moment for me. So I think even Miller coming on as well into that position certainly helped us as well.
Yeah, I do remember that moment of O'Hora getting the ball near the halfway line on that side, and then it was as if he suddenly remembered that he was a centre-half, and he was like, what do I do here? Do I run forward? Do I get rid of it? And he just kind of did nothing in the end. But again, he's obviously, I think he was one who was probably playing through the pain barrier, because he missed out the game against Kilmarnock. So he's obviously pulled through to put a shift in for that. So we're just going to look at some clips of the game, how it panned out. And you wanted to start with Hibs?
Yeah, I mean, this is just, I think like we're obviously talking about Hibs a lot as a counter-attack team and a team that's, looking to just pinch the ball and go forward. But there was we are more than that, or we're certainly evolving into more than that. And, the game against Kilmarnock, it's, that's the next step for David Gray. It's being able to break teams down. That's the big thing, especially when you're going to have a bit more of the ball. But certainly what they were trying to do in these positions here, and I think where Hearts sort of struggled against us early on, in moments like this, you can see you've got like obviously the ball working out to Nicky Cadden on that side, and you can just see Hearts are kind of out of shape there. There's no pressure on Joe Newell. We're working the ball into Nicky Cadden, which obviously pulls midfielder across. And if you go into the next clip there, once it goes in, Newell is able to just sort of absorb that bit of pressure. I think it's Musa and Devlin at this point trying to close him down. It works back into Nicky Cadden, and this is the advantage of having a wing back, rather than a full back, is that now when Nicky Cadden steps forward in the next clip, what we've got is you can see now Oyegoke can't really close him down because Eli Yuan's playing in between him and Halkett and is obviously racing into that position in behind. And then you can see, because of the runners we have there, you've got Boyle on Kairos, and we've got Josh Campbell on Kairos. We've got Martin Boyle behind Penrice, and then Chris Cadden coming in at the other side. And this is the chance that folk will remember where Nicky Cadden whips in an unbelievable ball that Boyle sort of squares back, and Chris Cadden gets on the end of it, and Craig Gordon actually makes quite a good save. And I think this is where Hearts really struggled against us, and this is what we're able to do to teams if we move the ball quickly in those areas, because it becomes difficult for the opposition to decide, right, is my fullback going to press that? Is it going to be my wide player? Is it going to be one of my central midfielders to kind of go over? And, we're able to create these little overloads on the pitch, which I think certainly works really well for us. And when you play a front three that's got Campbell, Boyle and Yuan in it, then we've got runners, people that are willing to run and go in behind. And that, when you're up against that type of pace, that frightens teams and has them dropping off a little bit. And then that obviously creates a bit more space for you. So I thought it was worth touching on, because I think that has been something that we've done really well against teams in recent weeks.
Yeah, aye, absolutely. And as I say, if we move it on a wee bit here, you wanted to look at how, it was an aggressive start from Hibs. I know, I think I agree with you watching it back. I think Hearts actually kind of played out and into good areas more than I remembered them at the time.
Yeah.
But I think there was still an emphasis on trying to be aggressive enough, I think, towards it at the start of the game.
Yeah, I think I was the same as you. Watching it back, I sort of thought, actually they got out our press a lot more than I remember watching it at the time. But what I would say is that this was pretty much how we set up from the off, which, I think we knew the ball was going to work its way to Penrice. I think that was, we knew that was going to happen. And I think the one thing they were trying to stop was the ball going directly into Spittle. So in this example here, Boyle's obviously just kind of allowing, he's pressing, but he's almost allowing the ball to go wide. You can see Chris Cadden is there already moving towards Penrice. Triantis is moving towards Spittle in the middle of the pitch, just beside the referee. Campbell's pushed in towards Beningame, and then Joe Newell's jumped up to push in towards Devlin. And obviously Eli Yuan's just marked there, because if Kai Rolls turns and goes out the other side and Gordon works it out wide, then that would be Eli's trigger to go and press the ball. And we were just able to do that really well at the beginning of the game and force Hearts back. And if you go into the next clip, you can see that because we're all moving, and that's actually O'Hora who's jumped forward in with Spittle in there. Now, listen, that can create an issue, because if that goes back to Kairos and he wallops that in behind and Hearts have got a pacey striker, then, yep, you're maybe pulling out Rocky as a centre-back into an area he doesn't want to. But Hearts never, because they played Wilson and Shankland, they just didn't have that option. And even if they did go long, Rocky, 9 times out of 10, dealt with that quite comfortably. Yeah. And it was just a really good example, I think, of what we've evolved into under David Gray, and what I think he's always wanted is this team that are really, really on the front foot and willing to work as a unit. And I think at the beginning of the season, we weren't quite doing that. And part of it was down to maybe the setup and the shape that we had. That 4-2-3-1, it just wasn't really working out for us. But in these examples here, you can just see how aggressive we are from that early part in the game.
And to the next one.
Yeah, and then this is one that obviously led to like a bit of a turnover. And again, like we've seen this against Aberdeen, that led to the third goal for Boyle, is that, Newell's up here pressing. It's a poor ball inside. I think that's Campbell that comes into in the next clip. And, if you go into the next one, just getting in, good tackle, good solid tackle in that part of the pitch from your sort of number 10. And then it breaks to Newell, and you can see there, you've got Eli Yuan, you've got you've got Nicky Cadden supporting, we've got Boyle going in, Campbell's up from the tackle and is racing into the box. And I think that just sort of epitomised what we were about in the first half. Just never really let Hearts settle into a groove and into a style. I did think we did do that in the second half, and we'll get to that. I think we were a wee bit too open, but just the distances we had round everybody at that point with Newell, Campbell, I thought it was perfect.
Yeah, that's a couple of games now we've been able to pick out wee moments sort of like this, where sometimes kind of snapshots of play can be misleading at times, but we kind of talked about this, about these wee pictures emerging where the opposition have got the ball and then you don't see an immediate out, for them, and it's just a sign of a sort of an emerging cohesion, really, isn't it? A real kind of really developing understanding of where players are supposed to be at what time.
Yeah, and a big part of it boils down to the consistency we've had in the team, and I think having that back three consistent, having the four across the middle consistent, I think has really helped that. The front, I think the front players, we've probably seen in the Kilmarnock game, even though I thought Hoylett was able to run in behind and actually did a fair shift up there, you can't quite play the same way, and you could see that we relied on Josh Campbell a lot more, dropping in and clipping the ball round the corner and being a bit more active as a number 10 in the home game against Kilmarnock there, compared to the last game against Hearts and the game against Aberdeen, where he was more just pressing and disrupting and turning the ball over. Do you know what I mean? So I think, the front players, I think you can change that. And I think if we do change the front players, then we do need to maybe think about a little bit of how we're trying to play and what we're trying to do, because it does change things ever so slightly. But I don't think we'll want to lose, that aggressive pressing on the front foot, because I do think that's been one of the the biggest things that's helped to kind of turn around in fortune and results.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. We're just taking it on a wee bit further again with this one.
Yeah, so I think it was probably worth to point out what Hearts were attempting to do, and I think even though I thought we defended it particularly well, they had their moments here where you can see at this point, Chris Cadden, unlike the last clip we showed, is kind of quite far off Penrice there. He's dropped into that position. There is that gap that's emerged between Boyle and Campbell, and you can see that Spittle into that position there, who's dropping in. And if you go into the next clip, that's what Hearts were trying to do. And basically O'Hara's come up with Spittle into that position. Now you can see he bounces that ball back into Penrice there and twists and turns and goes into that space. And now that's your there's your right wing back, there's your right centre back, here's Tynecastle and Newell. So they're now in line with your midfielders in this set. So you can imagine that space now in behind for Rocky and for for Iredale is now a bit more dangerous. However, we can see just here is there's your number 10 Shankland, who's going to have no influence on that play at all, and I'm pretty sure that's just Wilson in that position there. So there was a couple of times I think we got away with it to a certain extent, where I think Hearts did try to play through and we were a wee bit out of shape, but they just never managed to go in behind. But that's essentially what they were trying to do. And if you go into the next clip there was another moment a bit further on in the game where again you can see that Rose is stepping forward there. At this point, we've got the goal. The first 10 minutes have gone, that kind of crazy point in the game. Things are starting to settle a little bit. But that space in there, that's where Spittle wants to be. He just wants to be in that space between Chris Cadden, O'Hara. Tynecastle is obviously kind of sitting. It almost looks like we've kind of just got a number 6, and then it's actually Newell and Campbell is our kind of midfield too. And that's kind of how the game's kind of evolved at that point, because Campbell and Newell were pressing on Devlin and Beningame. But you don't want Tynecastle to go out and cover that, because then it leaves a big open space in the middle that Hearts can play through. And if you go into the next clip, when Hearts tried to move the ball, you can see we're in reasonably close together. We're in a good shape, but Kai Rose in this example goes long, and Boyle's done an okay press there. But obviously, if he opens up and plays it out to Penrice there, it's going to be a tough shift for Boyle to go Spittles over that side.
Yeah.
We probably would be in a little bit of trouble. And I kind of felt like going back and looking through the game, there was lots of moments where Hearts just made like really, really bad decisions in possession that, I'm not saying that we got away with anything, but I certainly think they probably could have hurt us more. And I think they did do that towards the start of the second half when they got a bit more possession.
Yeah, because you could see a sort of shift, and then obviously David Gray talked about sort of making changes to deal with that.
I think I don't know if there's another clip. On
there will be.
Yeah,
there we go. There.
Yeah, and in this example here, I think this could be the last one. Is that Devlin here? That's a switch all day long, and you can see that the way Hearts have positioned themselves in the back means that you've got Spittle, Wilson, and Shankland all in there, 3 players. That kind of takes up not only just our 3 centre halves, but with Musa up there as well. That kind of pulls our wing back in, and we're kind of it's quite tight in there, so that leaves the space on that opposite side of the pitch. But I think here Devlin just bounces it, Bedingame, they go back to Halkett, we then press forward and the ball kind of gets turned over. So, it's something that I think it looks like we're going to stick with this system sort of long term now. It looks like it's here to stay. And it is just something to think about, because I do think against other teams, that can become quite an issue. And I think, it's big distances for Chris Cadden to cover. As a wing back, obviously the commitment on getting forward as well, and I think they are the little pockets of space that can kind of, against better teams and teams in better form, that can hurt you.
Yeah, are there sort of simple things that Hibs can do to stop this, to compensate for it, or is it a natural sort of deficiency of the shape?
It can. I think in this it's knowing, right, we've tried our press like we just looked at in the other clips. We've been trying to get the ball back, and then say Hearts managed to get through, you're almost a wee bit in a sort of emergency mode to go, all right, we better drop back in here. I suppose at that point it is a deficiency in the system. There's not a lot that can be done, because if you're going to be asking, you don't really want to be dragging Yuan and Boyle back. We've seen a little bit of that against Aberdeen, where Boyle came back to almost try and help out on that right hand side, which then meant if we got the ball clear, he's like really deep and not as forward as he would like to be. So depending on who your front players are, you could ask them to do that, but I just think it's a natural thing. And if possible, you just want to kind of drop back into that sort of deeper, tighter, more compact shape, and just try and again force it wide, because that's where we will have the extra overload. But maybe there's a bit on Triantis and stuff, and Campbell and Newell, to kind of make sure that if that ball does get switched there, Campbell goes over to close it down, and Triantis maybe steps forward on Bedingame and things like that, rather than dragging Chris Cadden out so far wide. And even for O'Hora as well, he doesn't want to be out in that channel defending. If he does go out, making sure Triantis drops in to cover him and things like that. Yeah,
I suppose it's kind of ironing these things out as they go along. But I mean, there's just a brilliant moment. This really, wasn't it? I mean, it's kind of there was like kind of such a tension at the start of these games, I think, and you sort of see you sort of saw the release. I know this has got nothing to do with tactics, but I just think that the celebrations behind that goal are the first thing that come to mind, I think, when you see these scenes getting replayed. So obviously this is a mess from kind of Hearts' point of view. I mean, I suppose you do have a degree of sympathy. I suppose a lot of people watching this probably don't have a degree of sympathy with Kai Rose, but I think just from a purely footballing perspective, the ball sort of just hits off his face. But then there's things that happen before that creates that bit of chaos then, isn't there?
Yeah, it's really. I mean, I think like Rocky and on the goalkeeper, it's a big choice from Gay, because Rocky's probably in the air, he's dominant in the air, and to take him out the equation really and have him just sort of disrupting the goalkeeper, it's quite a big decision. And the rest of that, you can see in that position there, Hibs have just Hearts have got lots and lots of bodies in there, and some zonal, some trying to pick up players. But you can see that Campbell, just as that ball's been struck, like he's between Spittle, he's between Halkett, Rolls and sort of Bedingame are both on Iredale, and Campbell's just sort of free in there. And I think there's nothing, and we've talked about before, when Hibs have lost goals, and that there's probably nothing more frustrating for a manager when it's a set piece. It's just a ball whipped into the box, and nobody's picked up a man, and then and he just gets the header. And we know recently Campbell, in the air, he's always had that ability, but more so in recent games, he's been unbelievable in the air. So he just, the fact that he can get up there and just, genuinely put in a good challenge for the ball, then obviously you get your bit of luck. With Rose kind of trying to react to everything and run in, and it obviously just hits him. It's a brilliant header, to be fair to him, past Gordon. But and I think I'm glad, the goal. Obviously, I'm glad the goal stood in general, but it was never. There was no doubt that there was nothing wrong with that goal. As if you go, I think if you go into the next clip, like you can see, like that's the ball being kicked there. And Rocky, to be fair, there's a distance. He's a big distance away from Gordon, and as the ball's coming in. Yeah. It's Gordon that's shoving him away. So he's there. He's at least an arm's length away from him at this point. And, as it goes in for Campbell making connection, he's sort of moving the other direction. He's coming out of that space. I do think if the ball goes back across, so I think in the final clip, I do think if it goes maybe back across Gordon, then and Rocky has to duck out the way or something like that, then I probably could understand if the goal then, got ruled out potentially, especially if it went close to Rocky. However, the fact that it goes off rolls and just goes straight through his, down the middle, down his throat almost, then there's no doubts at all. So, and it's fair play. We've had a couple of this, a couple of decisions like that where the referee could have just easily went, okay, I'll allow that to happen. Allow that change from VAR, but actually the fact that he sort of looked at it and went, no, I'm going to stick with that. It's you've got to give credit there, I think.
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, it sounds a wee bit kind of counterintuitive to make any complaints, because I think the referee got to the right decision in the end, but I think it was definitely an example of one of the kind of the drawbacks of VAR when you're actually there. Watching it, because we were sitting in the press box, couldn't get a stream to work. Usually you try and get like a wee kind of accompaniment, so if something like this does happen, you can at least kind of watch the TV and see what's happening. But it was one of those moments where you were like, nobody knows what's going on here. They just didn't know what they were checking, who they were checking it for. So I mean, I suppose, as I said, probably shouldn't complain from a Hibs perspective because they got to the right decision in the end. But it is one of those ones where it's for the match going fan. It's not great when you're just kind of sitting there. Nobody really knows what's going on. But it did mean, I suppose, that the Hibs fans got to celebrate the goal twice, as did Josh Campbell. I don't think it's a minor point, I think, in this instance, and I don't think anybody would have been complaining, or certainly anybody in green and white would have been complaining about it afterwards. So moving us on now, just taking us into stoppage time in the first half, and this is just the kind of real kind of only big disappointing moment of the game for Hibs. I think you said it at the top of the show that things were getting a wee bit too open. You could just feel sort of Hearts creeping back into the game a wee bit. From a Hibs perspective, you just kind of wanted things to be sort of closed down in terms of getting to that half-time whistle. But the opposite happened, really, didn't it?
Yeah, and this just kind of highlights, this is kind of why we spent a bit of time talking about Spittle and Penrice and just what Hearts are trying to do. Because this time, unlike in the final clip when I showed that Devlin didn't play that pass and just went sideways and backwards and whatever, this time Halkett does hit the switch to Penrice. And it's we were talking about the decision making here. You can see Boyle at this point. You can obviously, he's anticipating that switch and he's going to try and get his make his way out towards that one. But as the switch goes, it goes to Penrice, and kind of rightly so. I just wanted to highlight Hearts of, like, you can see Wilson, Shankland in there, Musa as well. So Iredale, Rocky, O'Hora, they've kind of got their hands full a little bit in that position. Talking of what could we do, Triantis pretty much hasn't had a lot to do in these moments, so it could be a case that he does drop in to the defence, when that ball switched, anticipating that probably O'Hora is going to get pulled out, therefore I'm going to come in and be that extra centre half in the middle, which may be something that they had planned through because they mostly went down that side. But as the ball gets switched to the other side, and if you go into the next clip, that this is what they really want to happen, which is Karen just, gets there, but not enough to really impact the ball. It goes into Spittle. It's pulled O'Hora out into this position. And, after that, the only bit of quality really is Spittle does like quite a nice, like sort of right foot, left foot and whips it in quite sharp to the back post. And like, I didn't even bother clipping the final moments of it because it's clipped into the back post defensively. Yeah, Shankland does pull off to the back a little bit, and that is where you're probably, because he was playing in that number 10 role, you are probably looking at Tynecastle and somebody picking him up in that position and knowing fine well he's probably their likeliest goal scorer to a certain extent. But he just gets the kind of run on the guys. Wilson actually pulls Rocky out into the sort of front area, and obviously Shankland headers it. The headers going nowhere near on target, and I feel for Rocky because I think it's been so solid in these last couple of games, and it's just that kind of brief panic, and just he just swipes at it, and and for him it just ends up going past Smith and at the bottom corner. But it was really a goal out of nothing because it was a bar that moment. They really had nothing to show from that half.
Yeah, they had to. And I think just the way you kind of, sort of demonstrate this out about how that kind of switch was on for a lot of the half, and you just didn't see them do it. But I think you're very close to the dugout at Tynecastle when you're in the press box, and I think you could see for a lot of the half. We're kind of right behind the Hearts dugout, and you can see Neil Critchley he was for a lot of the half making that sort of that universal arm gesture to switch it, as if he was trying to get his players to do that. But they look like a team who are not playing with a lot of confidence, Hearts, and I think that's one of those things when you're not playing with a lot of confidence. It's so much easier for players to just make the short passes and not take risks. So I think that there was probably an element of that, but I think to add on to that, though, I think the confidence is probably dented by how Hibs started the game for that first 35 minutes or so. How many chances they created, just how good Hibs were. So it just shows you how if you play well, you can actually have this psychological effect on your opponents to not carry out their game plan, because it was kind of obvious what Critchley was trying to get his players to do. He was making that sort of gesture over and over, and as you said, that it didn't happen too many times. So again, you need to credit Hibs for not only playing well themselves, but then there's that knock-on effect of throwing Hearts off of what was obviously supposed to be their tactical game plan. Yeah,
and I think that's it. I think the goal, how many times have we said that like a goal, Hibs have maybe been in the ascendancy, and then the opposition have scored, and it's like then we've just stopped doing the things that we were doing that were good, that were working, but because we've conceded, there's a bit more panic. And I do think that goal, I think one, conceding it, and then, like you say, almost conceding it again because we got to celebrate again because it got disallowed, and they've had sort of 7-8 minutes to stew over that and then have to go through it. Yeah, and it's interesting you've said that, because watching it on the TV, you're going, it's really obvious what they're trying to do. And I would imagine Hibs were maybe confident enough to go, like, let them do that and we'll go over and defend that side. We're confident that Chris Cadden can defend that. We're confident O'Hora can do that, and we're confident that even if they do get the ball into the middle, with Rocky, Iredale, Tynecastle coming back in, we've got enough to kind of cover that. So there might have been, that might have been part of Hibs going, yeah, do it. Like, we're not, we'll take it on. But obviously, it's where their goal came from. And then, but I mean, we'll talk a little bit more, I suppose, about Hearts' second half. But, I think the game really hinged on substitutions. And, I actually think kind of one sub that maybe went a wee bit under the radar, and I thought he had a really good cameo, was Quan when he came on. And I think obviously we know Newell had been struggling a little bit fitness wise, so I think Quan just brought like a bit of an energy onto the middle. And we've seen it, and I suppose in the game against Kilmarnock yesterday, that he can be a bit overzealous, and when he picks up a booking, then his sort of influence diminishes a little bit, because I think he's very cautious of then picking up a second one. But he certainly likes to put himself about, and he likes to get forward and get on the ball and try to make things happen. And I think, like, just as he came on, just in the first couple of minutes, he was really part of like a couple of key chances where, like, the ball ends up with Chris Cadden down here. and he just he pushes right forward up into these areas. And I'm not quite sure you'd maybe get Newell and things like that going as far into those areas at this part of the game. But this actually a bit of play. If you go into the next part, it ends up we put a couple of bounce passes. Him and Tynecastle have a nice little like kind of 1-2, and then he's over the other side of the pitch here into this area, and he's there supporting Nicky Cadden as the ball gets put into him, and as it goes into Quan this time, we then see in the next clip Dwight Gale peeling off Martin Boyle almost, and in behind Halkett. And it's a great little ball from Quan like that. It can't, that's a really difficult ball to get right in that position, having just come on the pitch. And Gale ends up playing it back to Nicky Cadden, and this is the chance where he whips it to the back post, and Chris Cadden headers it, and it just comes off Gordon. So I just sort of thought Quan's influence when he came on, he just created he had a bit more energy in the middle of the park. He was willing to go across the pitch. I think he knew that Tynecastle at this point was going to stay a little bit deeper. And I just kind of liked what I saw of him in that position. And I just think that then that kind of sparks Gale into life, knowing he's going to get on these through balls and things like that. And I just thought his little cameo just before the goal, I just thought just started to get the game back in our favour, because he was willing to get on the ball and, make some passes, switch the play, run across, support the next one, play a through ball. Like, he just sort of sparked us back into life in an attacking sense.
Yeah, I think his better performances for Hibs, I think I've come when he is in those more advanced areas and the sort of more dynamic role, rather than just kind of sitting in front of the back four. Because I remember there was a few games where it was Quan and Tynecastle, and I think there was a few times we came on here and we just kind of talked about how we felt that it wasn't really working, and I think he does his best work higher up the pitch. Quan, he's very dynamic, he gets around, you can see that he can pick a pass as well. There was those few weeks where he looked as if he was getting closer and closer to scoring a goal from distance. He'd went from putting one into Rose Ed to almost sticking it in the top corner over the space of maybe 5 or 6 shots in target. He was getting closer and closer. So we'll see if he can manage one of those before the end of the season. But I think just the change in general from David Gray, again, it was quite bold to do that, because he said that, I've mentioned this about 3 or 4 times now, but we keep coming back to it, but it was just such an important moment in the game about how he wanted to combat or he wanted to make changes in midfield. But it wasn't just one of those subs where it was like, right, we're going to put somebody on who can just stop what Hearts are doing. It wasn't like a kind of a destructive change, if you like, to try and disrupt the opposition. It was obviously Quan can come in and do that, but it was also a kind of, right, we're going to give them something else to think about as well in the process, because we don't have it lined up. But when I was doing an article on the game a few days ago, and you'll be able to see it on the website, we do the pass maps at the start of the show, where you can see where players' average positions, where they picked up the ball, where they made passes from. And Quan was so high up the park. He wasn't brought on as a number 10, if you like, but his kind of average role and where he was getting involved was very, very high up. So there was obviously, I feel like he was brought on as much to give Hearts something else to think about as to just try and stop the sort of superiority, you like, if they were starting to enjoy in the middle of the park.
Yeah, and I'm going to make it negative now, but that's what frustrated me a wee bit with the Kilmarnock game yesterday, is when they went down to 10 men, I felt Quan was try to drop deep and get on the ball, and you're sort of like, well, Tynecastle can do that, just get yourself further forward and get into those areas, because he's very different to what we have. Like, he's sort of like he's almost like a hybrid of Tynecastle, Campbell and Newell, in terms of he can attack, he's got a pass on him, but and I feel like he has that, there is a position for him in there to sort of, you can imagine Campbell running in the box trying to get a header, and like you say about Quan, you can imagine him getting the ball at the edge of the box and scoring a goal and being in those positions. So yeah, and you're right to comment on the subs, because I think it is bold. It was bold, like Eliuan. I didn't expect him to come off. I didn't see that one coming. I thought we were going to probably be a bit more defensive, but Gray at that point, obviously, it's like, well, actually, let's turn this in their time, but in an attacking sense, and give Hearts something to think about. And I think putting Gale on and Quan, it was a masterstroke from him, to be fair. And and he obviously got what he deserved there. The other sub that I think killed it for Hearts really was Spittle going off for Danda. I think that was a crazy substitution to make. I don't understand that one at all, because he was the only real threat, I thought. Musa had a couple of, he had Iredale defended him brilliantly all game, but in the second half he had a couple of times where he managed to get past them, but not any real consistency where, free kicks wise and things like that was spit. I just couldn't understand why he wasn't left on the park, and I actually think him going off, the subs that we made and the impact we had straight away, I just think turned the game back for us.
Yeah, and obviously where are we here? I was just looking a wee bit at how Hearts were trying to disrupt Hibs in the second half.
Yeah, I thought it was worth kind of saying, like, this is probably why the subs were made in the changes, because if you go into the first clip there, Liam, if you remember the pressing clips we showed at the start compared to now, you can see there that we're a lot more open, and that's like, it's going to be something that the team is, subs are going to be a big part of how we're going to, if you want to press and be aggressive for 60-70 minutes, like, you're going to need to rely on your subs to change things up. And the game was becoming more open. You can see here, this is Halkett, there's Beningame free. He was never free in the first half. He always had somebody pressing him, and you can just see there that Newell's going towards Devlin. Triantis is sort of kind of caught between halfway, and because Campbell, I think, is just pressed on the left-hand side. So we're just a bit out of shape. And I think if you go to the next clip, there's a few of these that Beningame is able to turn then, and I think that's Wilson, who's dropped deep. It's bounced into Spittle, and then you can see Musa on the other side. You can see Shankland coming in, and I think the ball ends up going out towards Penrice on that side. And that's what we started to see a lot more of in the second half. And it just became that the front players just weren't able to press as aggressively as they were doing at the start of the game. And Hearts were managing to kind of get free and get on the ball. And, I know they're league where they are in the league and stuff, but they do have players that are able to create chances. And I think this is just kind of where I think probably Gray was going, right, we need a bit more energy in that middle of the pitch. And I think that's what Kwon can bring. And then in terms of a striker, even Gale coming on, even at the age he's at, he's still, for a 25-minute cameo, he can press quite well. He can be aggressive, and he's experienced, so he'll know when to run, when not to run, when to rein it back, and things like that. Whereas, with Ellie Yuan and even Boyle to a certain extent, it's not quite their position for, so they're still probably getting to grips with it and things like that. So I think that's probably how the game, I think, started to go in Hearts' favour. I think it was more so just us not being able to maintain the levels of what we were doing. And I think in the next clips, you can see again, this is, that Penrice getting on it. There's Spittle in that position there. You can just see the space these guys have now got, and Cadden's not quite there. He's now on the halfway line. The ball, I think, goes into Spittle here. If you go into the next clip. And again, you can see this is just where now Penrice is on the ball here, but there's Spittle pulling O'Hora out to this position here, and you can see there's Wilson going in behind, and that was Hearts starting to just get a little bit of a grip back on the game. And obviously you can see Musa and Shankland on the other side there, and that's just that for me, I think, was that 15-20 minute spell of just how Hearts managed to get through it. And I think that's where, sitting in the pub, I was going, right, do you put, you probably do Kwon for Newell, or, I get that, maybe Triantis to come off because he's not had the greatest game, and maybe you need Kwon and Newell in there. Do you then, you maybe want Gale on? What do you do there? But we'll definitely keep Ellie on and keep Boyle for the counter-attack. And so it came as like a bit of a surprise to see what he did. But as we're about to see, this is why he gets paid the big bucks. So obviously the ball is incredible from Gale, really, because he obviously chases a loose ball, keeps it in. It's a great little back heel inside into Chris Cadden. And then I think it was worth highlighting, he obviously starts to, you can kind of do a bit of Gale watch on that right-hand side as he starts to drift across. And it's, if you should go back and watch it, because it's just he just runs on the blind side of the defence as they sort of drop back deep. It's just all his experience. But again, from Triantis, so I like this. It was, we spoke about him before about, he's willing to play those risky passes. He's willing to take on those. And this one isn't a huge risky pass, but he could easily bounce that inside to Campbell, who would probably end up moving it towards Nicky Cadden. However, because Triantis just goes direct, it gives Nicky Cadden time to get the ball under control, get out his feet, and then get that delivery. Because I think Nicky Cadden's been unbelievable for us, but he's not someone that's going to run past people and whip it in. He needs time and space. We need to get him on the ball in space. And I think these direct passes from Triantis and into those areas work really well. And if you go into that next clip, obviously now you can see Hearts fullbacks, no chance to get out there.
Yeah. Whereas if you give them an extra second or two, it makes all the
difference. Sounds silly. It sounds really silly, but I think if it goes to Campbell, there's no guarantee Campbell is going to then turn and play it out to Nicky Cadden. He might dribble forward with the ball for a bit and then play it wide, and by then Nicky Cadden's under pressure and we work the ball back. And do you know what I mean? And some football can sometimes just come down to that, these little decisions. And I just think if you for Hibs at the moment, it's get the ball to Nicky Cadden in as much space as possible and let him deliver, because we've got runners in the box and we know his quality. And yeah, here the ball is ridiculous again. And it's a decent run from Martin Boyle to kind of go in towards the centre, actually, because to be fair, it's an unbelievable finish from Gale, which we'll get to, but Boyle's in a really good position as well. If there is a save or, if it comes loose, he's right in front of the goal. So it's a good run from him, and you can just see Gale, he's ran off Penrice, he's ran off Rolls, who's now looking at Boyle, and Halkett, just he's very flat-footed. He doesn't know where Gale is, I don't think, at all, really. And, the finish is unbelievable because
it's so difficult to do that.
It's so hard to do that, and he uses the and even if you go back, it sounds really, this is how sad I've been watching it, but Nicky Cadden's delivery, the ball is just spinning beautifully, rotating beautifully, and he just gets himself in, lets it go across his body, and he just sort of uses the pace of Nicky, because Nicky Cadden whips it in with a lot of pace, and he just uses that pace, and it's just such a deft touch to lift it past Halkett's trailing foot and away from Craig Gordon, and into the side net. And it's just an unbelievable finish, and you can see there he's not even really looking.
No, he just knows exactly what he wants to do there.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's just an incredible finish. And I think he's come in, he's had a couple of goals now, he's struggled a little bit, and he was a bit of an emergency sign-in towards the end, but great. I think we've found how best to utilise him, and I think he can come off the bench in these sort of moments and these cameo moments when the game's still there. He can certainly put himself about. He's a willing runner, and if you can just get that little bit of quality in the box for him, then this is what he can do.
Yeah, and he seems happy with that role as well. Obviously, he was talking about retiring. He's still talking about making it. So it makes such a difference, I think, when you've got a player whose mindset is kind of focused on being that guy rather than being a striker who wants to be starting every game, and then sits on the bench frustrated for 60 odd minutes, and it comes on and then has to change that mentality. So I think when you've got an impact player who is happy to be an impact player, that makes such a difference.
Totally. No, absolutely. And I think, you can, imagine when maybe Kieran Bowie's back and maybe January, if we do a bit of business, even if that all happens, Dwight Gale's still I'm sure he's a really good character in the dressing room. And even at the end of the game, when the game finished, the way he was celebrating and things like that, he really seems like a good pro and really part of the team and part of it. And like you say, it's absolute gold dust having a player like that who's got that ability in and around the box, who's happy to just come off the bench in that sort of super sub kind of role. Because, as these next games are going to be, and we've seen against Kilmarnock, it's going to be tight. All these games, all these teams in the league, the form's all over the place. Teams who have been on big runs are now struggling. Teams like us who have been on poor runs are now putting runs together. Anybody can beat anybody, and sometimes games boil down to these moments, and if you've got that quality in there and you're utilising it well, like a fresh Dwight Gale off the bench for the last 20 minutes, rather than a Dwight Gale who's ran his course for 65, 70 minutes and has to come off. It's credit to Gray and just the way he's sort of put the team together in terms of the personnel at the minute.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just still looking at that the finish on the screen. I was just trying to work out if I'd try to do that, whether it would come off my heel and go back the way it came, or I'd open up far too much and it would go for a throw in at the other side. who's been the judge of that, folks. But for now, we are going to leave it there because this is a perfect moment to
Great image to leave, yeah.
in terms of the Edinburgh Derby. A huge win for Hibs, and obviously they then backed that up with a win over Kilmarnock at home. Maybe not one that will live as long in the memory, but probably just as important in terms of keeping this win and run going. So yeah, we are going to leave it there. Thanks again to Craig for yourself for this brilliant insight. As always, we'll be back on New Year's Day to preview the trip to St Johnstone on January the 2nd. So do tune in for that if you're able. And obviously, on top of that, have a lovely new year. And we'll speak to you again very, very soon.